Everyone talks about changing your vibration, thinking positive, attracting what you desire. But the universe is not a mirror of words. It responds to courage. And that's why, while many wait for something to happen, few actually live the quantum leap. The leap doesn't happen when you understand the theory, but when you accept the risk. It's the instant when the soul decides to act even without guarantees, moved by a faith that requires no proof. It's when the human being abandons the comfort of logic and hands over command to their own consciousness. And in that moment, the entire reality shift. The truth is that the universe doesn't reward those who dream. It rewards those who launch themselves. Because the quantum leap is not a change of thought. It's a change of state. It begins when fear loses its power to paralyze, when the mind stops doubting and when the heart takes the helm of life. This video won't offer you catchy phrases. It will show you step by step what it really means to cross the border of the predictable. We'll talk about faith, sacrifice, pain, and rebirth. We'll dismantle the idea of time, understand why suffering is only the beginning of expansion, and discover that abundance is not born from accumulation, but from detachment. And if you're willing to listen with your soul, something inside you will begin to move, not by enchantment, but by understanding. Because when consciousness awakens, reality changes. And when that happens, life stops being a weight and becomes an infinite field of creation. The true quantum leap doesn't happen when someone simply decides to desire a new life. It begins the instant a person understands that the universe does unmove by the beautiful words they pronounce, but by the bold gestures they sustain. Reality is shaped by vibrations, and every vibration is action, not intention. There is an invisible force that silently observes how much the human being is willing to abandon their own inertia. When they take a step that defies their own logic, the universe responds, reorganizing everything around them so that the new path becomes possible. For a long time, faith was confused with positive thinking. Thinking positive is remaining on the surface of the mind, trying to paint bright colors over the fear that still lives deep in the chest. Faith, on the other hand, is diving into the unknown with a heart on fire even without knowing what awaits on the other side. The quantum leap is therefore a movement of radical trust. It's when the human being decides to act before reason permits, guided only by the conviction that something greater sustains them. The universe doesn't reward passivity because passivity is a subtle form of fear. When the individual settles into the safety of the predictable, they become part of the slow flow of the mass that doesn't create, only repeats. But there's an instant in the journey when the soul grows tired of repeating the same script. It's at this point that the leap announces itself. It is when consciousness realizes that staying in the same place is more dangerous than throwing oneself into the void. Jumping in front of reality's car is breaking with the inertia of the domesticated mind, which always seeks guarantees before living. The quantum leap demands sacrifice. Sacrificing is not losing. It's letting go of the old form so that the content can expand. Those who desire a new life without sacrificing anything have not yet understood the principle of transformation. Every creation involves renunciation. The cocoon must break so the butterfly can exist. The seed must die in the earth so the wheat can flourish. It's the law of transmutation that governs both the atom and the soul. When someone acts with faith, even without proof, they're sending an unequivocal message to the universe: I am ready. And the universe responds to readiness with synchronicities, improbable coincidences, and openings that previously seemed impossible. This is the sacred mechanics of the quantum leap, a dialogue between the visible and the invisible, between the human and the divine. And when this conversation begins, nothing remains the same. But this is only the beginning of the movement, because the leap is not a single act. It extends into the following choices in how the individual faces the unpredictable and learns to dance with chaos. And it's precisely at this point that the game of consciousness deepens, revealing a wisdom hidden in the small creatures that inhabit the physical world. The quantum leap comes to life when one understands what it means to act outside of predictability. And perhaps no image explains this better than that of the cat before the jaguar. Both belong to the same kingdom, share instincts in nature, but only one of them survives the jungle of consciousness, the one who dares to be unpredictable. The jaguar, though powerful, is prisoner of its own strength. It depends on the certainty of attack, on control of territory, and on repetition of what it already knows. The cat, on the contrary, escapes fate because it is free from logic. It moves between spaces, plays with the unexpected surprises. This is the essence of awakened consciousness, not winning by force, but by lightness. In everyday life, most people live like the jaguar, powerful in potential but limited by predictability. They repeat the same thoughts, the same routines, the same excuses. They become victims of the system, trapped in a labyrinth of bills, fear, and obligations. The mind, when oppressed by survival, loses the capacity to create. And it's at this point that true modern slavery is born. The one in which the human being believes they are free while repeating yesterday's same decisions. The oppressor is not the government, the boss, or the market. The true oppressor is internal. It's the voice of fear that convinces the individual that it's dangerous to change, that it's better to endure the known pain than to risk the unknown. This voice keeps them domesticated, obedient, comfortable within a world that slowly drains them. And while this voice commands, 95% of people live in a state of spiritual anesthesia, believing that reality is something that happens to them, not something they themselves create. The cat defeats the jaguar because it doesn't obey fear. It is the symbol of awakened consciousness that plays with reality instead of fearing it. When the human being begins to act this way with light but constant courage, the universe reorganizes itself around their vibration. The laws of quantum physics manifest in their most spiritual form. The unpredictable emerges. The improbable materializes because energy responds to the vibration of boldness. The quantum leap, then, is not about changing the world, but about changing one's own internal rhythm. When the individual breaks the pattern of repetition, life's flow changes direction. Reality begins to dance to the beat of their new frequency. And this is the point where they stop being a victim of reality and become its author. But this transformation requires more than courage. It takes something that transcends logic and challenges the ego, the power of faith and sacrifice, the same principles that sustained humanity's greatest spiritual journeys. And that's where the leap becomes sacred. When the soul understands that only detachment can open the doors of the infinite. When the human being understands that courage alone doesn't sustain the crossing, they discover the true value of sacrifice and faith. Every spiritual transformation requires surrender. And this surrender is not a gesture of weakness, but an act of power. The universe doesn't negotiate with fear. It only responds to the vibration of faith. And faith, in the language of the cosmos, means acting without guarantees, like someone crossing an invisible bridge, sustained only by trust in their own spirit. The great masters of humanity understood this. Abraham raising the blade over his son was unproving blind obedience, but manifesting the willingness to renounce control. Moses, leaving the comfort of the palace to face the desert, was giving up security in the name of inner freedom. And Christ surrendering himself to the cross was giving in to suffering, but demonstrating that true life begins where the fear of losing ends. In each of these examples, sacrifice wasn't punishment but a bridge to the infinite. In spiritual language, to sacrifice means to make sacred. When someone renounces what imprisons them, a suffocating job, a paralyzing relationship, a limiting belief, they are performing an act of purification. They're telling the universe, I trust that something greater is prepared for me. And the universe responds with the new because the space for the new only manifests when the old is left behind. Holding on to what no longer vibrates in harmony is preventing the flow of abundance from reaching the heart. Attachment is the great obstacle to expansion. Attachment to the little, to the known, to what seems safe. The human being tries to control reality as if it were an object, but consciousness doesn't bend to command. The universe reveals itself when there is trust. And this trust is the purest form of faith. While the mind tries to understand, the heart knows. And it's this silent knowing that moves mountains. Abundance is not a prize granted to the deserving. It's a natural consequence of those who live in harmony with the whole. When the soul detaches from fear and hands over command to the divine, the flow opens. It's at this moment that the impossible becomes everyday and improbable paths light up. Sacrifice is the gesture that awakens the creative power within the being. But faith is not an isolated event. It needs to be nourished by the understanding that time is only an illusion created by the linear mind. Because the true quantum leap doesn't happen in a distant future. It happens now in the instant when consciousness awakens to the fact that everything is already available in the eternal present. Upon understanding the power of faith, the human being begins to perceive something even deeper. Time, as it has been taught, is a construction of the mind and not a reality of the spirit. Consciousness doesn't live in yesterday or tomorrow. It only exists in the now. It's only the mind with its fears and expectations that fragments the flow of eternity into past and future, creating an invisible prison where the individual always feels late, incomplete, or waiting for something that hasn't yet arrived. But the universe doesn't recognize, not yet. It only responds to what vibrates in the present. True faith is not waiting for the miracle. It's living as if it had already happened. When someone vibrates at this frequency, time stops being a line and becomes a field, an ocean of possibilities that reorganizes itself according to the level of consciousness observing it. Each thought is a seed planted in this field, and each word is a force that shapes it. The human being, through spiritual ignorance, usually lives as a slave to the calendar. They count the days, the hours, the decade. They wait for the right moment to act without realizing that the right moment is when they decide to be. Creative energy doesn't manifest in waiting but in presence. When the mind quiets and the being enters a state of total attention, the universe bows before them. For now is the point where the divine and the human meet. Every real transformation happens outside the measure of time. That's why certain changes seem instantaneous. A sudden healing, an improbable encounter, a revelation that changes the course of an entire life. It's not a miracle in the common sense. It's the physics of consciousness. When the observer changes, the universe responds immediately because reality is a mirror that reflects the observer's level of understanding. Time, therefore, is only the distance between what is believed and what is lived. When this distance is dissolved by conviction, manifestation occurs. That's why the quantum leap is always an act of presence. Not a plan for the future, but a decision made with the entire being in the now. And in this state of full presence, even pain acquires another meaning. It stops being punishment and becomes language. Because pain doesn't arrive to punish, but to warn that something within us is ready to be born. And when the human being understands this code, suffering transforms into a portal, leading them to the next stage of consciousness, rebirth. When time stops being a prison and the present becomes the only place of existence, the individual begins to understand the true role of pain. It's not an enemy to be defeated, but a messenger of rebirth. Every time the soul is about to expand its consciousness, the body and mind enter discomfort. It's the same principle that makes the seed break its own shell to reach the light. Pain is the sign that something old is dissolving to make room for the new. Humanity learned to flee from pain. It created distractions, anesthetics, explanations. But the more the human being flees, the more it grows because pain is not punishment. It's an invitation. It invites one to look within, to listen to what was neglected, to shed the masks that the ego built to appear strong. All suffering contains a hidden teaching, and the quantum leap only happens when one accepts to traverse this crossing with awakened consciousness. The most intense pains don't come to destroy, but to break the structure that prevented growth. They are the labor pains of the soul. Those who try to resist them end up prolonging their own process, like someone holding a breath that should already be exhaled. Liberation happens the moment one accepts pain as part of life's movement. Suffering ceases when resistance ends. And it's precisely in this instant of surrender that the miracle happens. The old identity dissolves and a new frequency installs itself. True transformation doesn't occur in the absence of pain, but in the way it's understood. The awakened human being doesn't ask, "Why is this happening to me?" but "What is this happening through me for?" This shift in perspective completely alters the vibrational field. What was once weight becomes strength. What once seemed like an ending reveals itself as a beginning. Pain, when embraced, converts into wisdom. Every being who rises spiritually passes through this purifying fire. No rebirth is gentle because dying to the old self is the greatest of sacrifices, but it's also the most beautiful. Those who emerge from this process are no longer the same. Their eyes see the world in a new way and their heart beats to a different rhythm. They discover that the light they sought outside was always hidden in the shadow they avoided looking at. And it's at this point in the journey when the human being has already learned to transform pain into fuel that they begin to feel a new energy, lightness. Not the lightness of escape, but that which is born from the conviction of someone who understood life's game. And it's exactly this conviction, firm, serene, and luminous, that leads them to the final stage of the quantum leap, the consciousness of being a co-creator of all reality. After crossing through the fire of pain and understanding the value of presence, the awakened human being finds conviction. Not that arrogant conviction built by the ego that needs to prove something to the world, but a silent, firm certainty that is born from recognizing one's own divine essence. Conviction is the end point of doubt and the starting point of conscious creation. It's when the individual stops asking permission to live and simply lives because they understood that the universe responds to their state of being, not to their pleas. Lightness emerges as a natural consequence of this conviction. When one has the full certainty that everything that happens is in service of consciousness expansion, fear dissolves. Life stops being a battlefield and becomes a field of experiences. The weight of expectations dissolves because the being understands that nothing needs to be controlled. Everything is already being conducted by the intelligence of the whole. Lightness is not disinterest, it's absolute trust. It's the spiritual maturity of someone who has already seen chaos and chosen to dance with it. Conviction is the fuel of the universe. It's the vibration that sustains reality, the invisible thread that connects thought, emotion, and manifestation. When the human being believes without hesitation, their energy aligns with the creative movement of the cosmos. That's why the masters, prophets, and sages never doubted. They knew that doubting is breaking the flow, interrupting communication with the quantum field. Conviction is the language the universe understands. And when it's pure, the universe responds without delay. In this state of consciousness, the being perceives that there's no longer separation between them, God and the universe. Everything is the same energy vibrating at different frequencies. The quantum leap then reveals its essence. It's not an escape from reality, but a return to the origin. The moment when the soul remembers it was always a creator. The miracle is not in transforming the external world, but in awakening to the power that was always within. The lightness of this understanding is liberating. The individual stops fearing losses because they know that nothing can truly be lost. Everything that leaves simply makes space for what needs to come. And in this simplicity, life becomes a continuous flow of creation, learning, and expansion. Consciousness no longer seeks results because it understood that it already is the result itself. And so, at the end of this journey, the quantum leap reveals itself not as a destination but as a state of being, a way of existing in full communion with the whole where acting, trusting, and creating become the same movement. And it's at this point of vibrant stillness that the new cycle begins to pulse, inviting each awakened soul to continue the path now with a light heart and the conviction of someone who knows it is the creator of life itself, who lives through us. So ask yourself, how long will you wait for the right moment to act? How long will you doubt the power that pulses within you? The leap doesn't happen tomorrow. It happens the instant you decide to trust. From here on, all the universe needs is your courage. Faith is the bridge, sacrifice is the portal, and conviction is the key. Use everything you learned here and observe. The world will begin to respond in another way. And if this message touched you, if it ignited in you the desire to truly transform, then subscribe to the channel and activate notifications, because there's much more knowledge awaiting your awakened consciousness. Each new video is one more step in this journey of expansion. You're not alone on this path.